Hi, I'm Edward, and I'm proud to introduce the Marching Revolution podcast. Just a heads up, this show is powered by my AI workforce, so you won't be hearing my voice just yet. Instead, you'll be hearing two AI hosts bring these stories to life. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the show, and welcome to the revolution. This is the Marching Revolution podcast.
Boots on the ground with a thunderous beat, hearts in sync, our purpose complete. Map of the future drawn by our stride, through the struggle we walk unified. Marching forward where no chains can hold, hands in the dirt we carve.
All right, comrades, gather around the digital campfire. Welcome to the Marching Revolution.
Hey, everyone.
We're not just scratching the surface today. No. We're grabbing a shovel and getting deep down into the soil of something many of us know intimately.
Yep. Deep dive time.
We're here to unpack, dissect, and maybe even, liberate ourselves from some long-held assumptions about the marching arts.
That's right. Today, we're engaging with a piece of writing that really doesn't pull any punches. It's a direct confrontation with the underlying structures of an activity that evokes intense emotions, both positive and negative.
Definitely intense.
We're about to dive headfirst into some potentially uncomfortable truths, I think.
Okay, but before we get our hands dirty, a bit of necessary housekeeping. This is straight from Edward Michael Francis, the visionary behind Cinemarch Media, LLC. Got to read this bit verbatim.
Okay, go for it.
This podcast contains commentary and personal opinion. All views expressed are those of Edward Michael Francis, founder of Cinemarch Media, LLC. The content is presented for educational and commentary purposes only and does not represent the views of any organization, corps, institution, or entity mentioned.
Right. Standard legal stuff. Important.
Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get to the heart of the matter. Today's deep dive is into Edward Michael Francis's article, Drum and Bugle Corps is a Cult.
Yeah, that title alone, it grabs you.
It really does. And look, Edward Michael Francis, we've discussed his stuff before.
Right, and he's revisited the whole drum corps question.
He landed somewhere pretty definitive this time.
Very definitive. His firm conclusion now, drum corps is a cult.
Wow. Okay. That's a bold statement.
It is, no question. But look, his arguments, the ones he lays out in this new piece, they're pretty well structured.
And that's what we're going to dig into today, right?
Yeah.
His reasoning behind that label.
Exactly. Let's unpack it.
All right. This isn't your typical feel-good nostalgia piece, not at all. This is a critical exploration of the very foundations of the marching arts activity, viewed through a particularly sharp and challenging lens.
Yeah, and I think it's vital to understand the author's intention right from the outset. As Francis states in the author's note, the use of the word cult is not accidental or hyperbolic, it's deliberate.
Absolutely deliberate.
It's intended to provoke a level of honest and maybe difficult conversation that, might not happen with softer terminology. It forces you to confront it.
Exactly. And what's crucial, I think, is that Francis explicitly acknowledges that positive experiences, the camaraderie, the artistic achievements, the sheer thrill of performance, those can absolutely coexist with systemic issues.
Right. It's not about invalidating the good parts. We all had good parts, right?
For sure. It's about interrogating the potential bad, the structures underneath.
Precisely. The author isn't demanding a wholesale rejection of the activity we've all invested so much in. I mean, that's not the point.
Yeah.
Instead, it's a call for a clear-eyed examination of the structures that underpin the drum corps experience. The focus is on collective responsibility for these structures and, as Francis emphasizes, fostering honest dialogue for the benefit of future generations.
For the kids coming up.
Exactly. For the people who will participate in this activity, we're not just reminiscing here, we're potentially laying the groundwork for real change.
Okay, so the article anchors its analysis in the work of psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton. He did extensive research on cult behavior, right?
It's one. Lifton's criteria.
And Francis uses these criteria as a framework to examine the drum corps experience. Let's start with the first one they mentioned, milieu control.
Milieu control.
Okay, when we talk about drum corps, what does that look like? Controlling someone's environment.
Well, milieu control, in Lifton's framework, it refers to the manipulation of communication and, crucially, the restriction of an individual's environment, their whole world. Think about a drum corps summer tour. For those intensely packed months, the members' world shrinks dramatically. I mean, really shrinks.
Oh, yeah.
They're on the bus, at the rehearsal site, at the housing site. Rinse, repeat, access to outside information, to friends and family outside the core, it's often heavily curtailed.
Not just by rule sometimes, but just by the sheer exhaustion, right?
Exactly. The schedule, the remote locations they often end up in, you barely have time or energy to connect outwards.
Right. Your entire existence becomes centered on the core, just the core. And the article makes a really important point here. It's not just about the duration of this intense control, like how many months.
No, it's the intensity.
Yeah, even a summer of complete immersion where your every waking moment is dictated by the core schedule and norms, that can have a profound and lasting impact on your perspective, your sense of self.
Yeah.
It's about the intensity and the all-encompassing nature of it.
Absolutely. That intense immersion and relative isolation create this unique pressure cooker environment. Total bubble.
Uh-huh.
The values, the norms, the expectations of the core become the dominant reality. They often overshadow or even kind of supplant outside perspectives and influences.
Right.
This controlled environment, as Francis argues, becomes the fertile ground for many of the other characteristics of cult behavior that the article goes on to explore. It's really the foundation.
It sets the stage for everything else.
Yeah, exactly. It's where these other elements can take root and, flourish.
Okay, next up we have mystical manipulation. Now that sounds a bit theatrical, but how does the article connect this idea to the often grueling realities of drum corps?
Right, mystical manipulation. It sounds kind of out there, but in this context, it isn't about literal magic or anything.
Okay, good.
Instead, it describes how a group will frame events and experiences, often attributing a special, maybe even divinely ordained meaning to them. And they do this in a way that reinforces the group's ideology and maintains control.
How does that look in drum corps then?
In drum corps, this frequently manifests in the way that pain, suffering, sheer exhaustion, the intense physical exertion, the chronic sleep deprivation, the significant emotional toll, all of that is presented not just as hardship to be endured.
Which it absolutely is.
Oh, totally. But it's presented as somehow inherently transformative, even absolutely necessary for achieving greatness and embodying the supposed values of the activity. The suffering is the point, almost.
Yeah. It was almost like if you weren't completely broken down by the end of the rehearsal block, you weren't dedicated enough. You weren't trying hard enough.
Right. There was this unspoken competition, almost.
Totally. Who was the most exhausted? Who was pushing through the worst pain? And it was almost worn as a badge of honor, even when it clearly wasn't healthy or sustainable. It's like the pain itself became proof of your commitment. Like, look how much I'm suffering for this.
Precisely. The narrative becomes that this level of suffering isn't just an unfortunate byproduct of a demanding activity. It's actively reframed. It's a crucible that forges character, builds resilience, and ultimately leads to superior performance and personal growth.
That'll be true for you.
That's the message, yeah. It's presented as an essential and unavoidable step on the path to excellence. And that creates this deeply ingrained sense that those who endure the most hardship are somehow more dedicated, more deserving of success, and ultimately more valuable to the group.
Which subtly discourages anyone from questioning it, right? Like, maybe this is too much.
Exactly. It subtly discourages any questioning of the intensity or the potential harm of these conditions. You don't want to seem weak or like you don't get it.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the demand for purity. The article discusses this not just in terms of striving for, musical and visual perfection on the field.
Which is obviously huge in drum corps.
Huge.
Yeah.
But also the expectation of unwavering mental toughness and even emotional silence among members. Can you elaborate on how this plays out?
Yeah. The demand for purity in drum corps operates on multiple levels. There's the obvious pursuit of physical perfection, the relentless drilling to achieve flawless execution, the expectation of peak athletic performance night after night.
Cleanliness is godliness, basically.
Pretty much. And then there's the musical purity striving for perfect intonation, articulation, ensemble blend, all that technical stuff. But as Francis points out, it extends far beyond these performance-related aspects. Members are often implicitly and sometimes explicitly expected to project an image of absolute unwavering mental fortitude. Iron minds.
Like robots, almost.
Kind of. To express doubts, vulnerabilities, or even just normal human emotions like sadness or frustration, that can be seen as a sign of weakness, a failure to embody the idealized, tough drum corps member.
So you just got to bottle it up.
Often, yeah. Emotional expression, particularly anything perceived as negative, critical, or questioning of the established norms, is often subtly or not so subtly discouraged. Keep it to yourself.
And I think the article really hits a nerve when it talks about how that seemingly innocuous question, where did you march, becomes this instant reductive measure of your worth, your whole identity in the activity.
Oh, absolutely. It's like shorthand for your perceived status.
Yeah. Your entire journey, your individual contributions, the nuances of your experience, it can be instantly boiled down to that single affiliation. Which core?
Exactly. It establishes an immediate hierarchy and a system of validation based purely on the perceived prestige and competitive success of the core you were a member of. Doesn't matter if you had a terrible experience at a top core or an amazing one somewhere else.
It inadvertently minimizes the unique experiences and individual contributions, right? Reducing a complex human being to a simple label.
Totally. A mark of perceived status. The demand for purity, in this broader sense, is about conforming to this idealized image, the completely dedicated, utterly unquestioning, perpetually resilient performer, often at the expense of individual authenticity and, frankly, well-being.
The next criterion is the cult of confession. This sounds rather intense. How does that manifest within a drum corps setting, according to the article?
Yeah, cult of confession sounds pretty heavy. As described by Lifton and applied by Francis, it involves the systematic elicitation of personal vulnerabilities, shortcomings, maybe even transgressions within a group setting.
Okay.
But, and this is key, unlike healthy forms of sharing and support, these confessions are often used not for individual growth or empathy, but to strengthen group identity, reinforce the group's norms, and even exert control.
So how does that look practically?
In drum corps, it can take various forms. Maybe forced sharing of personal struggles during emotionally charged group meetings, those end-of-day huddles.
Oh yeah, the circle talks.
Right, or public acknowledgments of mistakes made during rehearsals or performances, calling people out.
I'm immediately thinking of those instances where, say, one individual makes a noticeable error during a crucial run-through.
Yep. Tick happens.
And as a result, the entire section or even the whole corps gets punished physically. Push-ups, laps, whatever.
Classic example.
It's as if the individual's mistake becomes a collective failing, and the confession is almost extracted through that shared discomfort and exertion. The pressure to not be the one who messes up becomes immense.
That's a very pertinent example. Individual actions are framed as having direct consequences for the entire group. It fosters a sense of collective responsibility, sure, but also potential collective shame and resentment. Nobody wants to be that person. The article also points out that the sharing of emotional vulnerabilities in these often highly charged settings can be subtly manipulated to reinforce group identity that we're all in this together, suffering together mentality.
Which feels good in the moment sometimes.
It can, but it can also inadvertently discourage individual dissent or deviation from the established norms. If you've confessed your struggles within the group, it can feel much harder to then challenge the very system that might be contributing to those struggles in the first place. You're implicated.
Makes sense. Okay, sacred science is the next characteristic.
Yeah.
The article argues that within drum corps, there's this unquestionable nature to the system. The mantra, trust the process, often serves to discourage critical thought.
Oh, trust the process, the holy words.
That phrase definitely resonates. Hear it constantly.
Absolutely. It's practically a sacred incantation within drum corps, isn't it? And look, there's certainly a pragmatic aspect to trusting the experience and expertise of the instructional staff, of course.
You have to some extent.
Right. But the article astutely argues that it can also function as a powerful mechanism to shut down critical thinking and stifle any form of constructive dissent. It becomes a thought stopper.
How so?
Well, the established methods, the rehearsal schedules, the performance expectations, the entire system can become sacrosanct. It's placed beyond scrutiny or challenge, even when there are legitimate and pressing concerns about individual well-being, the effectiveness of certain techniques, or the overall sustainability of the model.
It's like to question the process, even with valid reasons, is immediately interpreted as a lack of commitment. Like you don't fully believe, or you're being negative.
Exactly, or it's seen as a personal failing, you're not tough enough, you don't get it. This creates a pervasive environment where individuals become deeply hesitant to voice any concerns.
Even if they see something that seems objectively wrong or harmful.
Right. For fear of being ostracized or labeled as a negative influence or just not a team player.
Yeah.
The sacred science aspect cultivates this sense of infallibility around the established ways of doing things. It subtly discourages members from critically analyzing the methods being employed, even if those methods are demonstrably causing them harm, physically or emotionally, or seem counterproductive.
The message is just: staff knows best, the process works, your job is to comply. Don't ask questions.
That's the underlying message, yeah. Execute without questioning the principles.
Loaded language is the next feature Lifton identifies. The article provides some very specific examples from the drum corps subculture specialized vocabulary, like tour goggles, bus funk, suda, splooey. Can you break down how this kind of language functions?
Yeah, loaded language is an incredibly effective tool for shaping reality within any insular group, and drum corps is definitely no exception. This specialized vocabulary serves several key purposes.
Like what?
Firstly, it fosters a strong sense of in-group identity and belonging. If you understand and use the lingo, suda, splooey, whatever, you're immediately recognized as part of the tribe, someone who gets it.
Insider status.
Totally. But as the article accurately points out, this insider language can also profoundly flatten nuance and simplify complex, sometimes really negative experiences into easily digestible shorthand. It makes things seem normal that maybe aren't.
Like tour goggles, for instance.
Yeah.
That perfectly encapsulates that feeling of being so completely immersed in the demanding, often surreal environment of tour that your perspective gets skewed. You lose touch with outside reality.
Exactly, or bus funk, right? That very specific, often deeply unpleasant odor that permeates everything on tour. Having a term for it makes it almost...
It normalizes.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, wow, the hygiene conditions on this bus are potentially hazardous, you just say, ooh, bus funk.
Precisely. By having these readily available, almost dismissive terms, it becomes easier to downplay or ignore the challenging or problematic aspects. Oh, that's just bus funk. Avoids engaging with the underlying discomfort or health issues.
And pseudo is pretty blatant.
Yeah, pseudo subtly reinforces a culture of unquestioning obedience. It actively discourages questioning authority or expressing dissent, even frames it as annoying or time-wasting.
So these terms, even the funny ones, aren't just jokes.
No. While they often seem innocuous, they subtly but powerfully shape how members perceive, interpret, and articulate their experiences within that drum corps bubble. They provide a limited, pre-approved framework for understanding what you're going through. They load the language against critique.
Doctrine over person is another particularly stark criterion. The article argues that individual pain, physical or emotional, is often dismissed or devalued if it conflicts with the official narrative, the goals, the needs of the corps. That sounds potentially very harmful.
It is deeply concerning. Doctrine over person signifies a systemic prioritization of the group's ideology, its goals, or even just the perceived needs of the collective over the fundamental well-being and individual needs of its members.
How does that show up in drum corps?
In a multitude of ways, unfortunately, like when performers are actively pressured to rehearse or perform through significant physical injuries because the show must go on.
The classic.
Right. The competitive success of the corps is deemed paramount. Or, similarly, when members express genuine emotional distress, burnout, mental health concerns.
Which must happen a lot.
Constantly. But these are often dismissed as signs of weakness, a lack of mental toughness, because acknowledging them would disrupt the prevailing narrative of unwavering dedication and resilience. It would admit the system has flaws.
I've certainly heard countless stories, and maybe even seen it, where individuals were strongly encouraged, if not outright pressured, to perform while clearly injured, risking further, potentially long-term damage.
Happens all the time. Or being told to just push through debilitating emotional exhaustion as if it's just a matter of willpower, not a real health concern.
It's like the individual's physical or mental state becomes entirely secondary to the goal of a clean run or high score, regardless of the personal cost.
That's precisely the dynamic the article is highlighting. The individual's pain, their legitimate concerns, are framed not as valid issues needing care, but as obstacles to the group's success.
The doctrine comes first.
The doctrine, performance excellence, winning, maintaining the image of strength, becomes the absolute priority, even when it directly jeopardizes the health, safety, and well-being of the members who are the very core of the activity. The individual gets subordinated.
Finally, the last of Lifton's criteria the article examines is the dispensing of existence. This sounds incredibly severe, dehumanizing almost. What does it mean here?
Yeah, dispensing of existence is a heavy phrase. It refers to the insidious ways a group subtly or overtly devalues, marginalizes, or even effectively erases the identities and significance of individuals who leave the group.
Okay.
Or, maybe more importantly, those who dare to criticize its practices or beliefs, the whistleblowers, the dissenters.
How does that play out in the drum corps community?
Unfortunately, it can take several forms. Performers who quit mid-season, maybe due to injury or burnout or just realizing it's not for them. They might be subtly or not so subtly stigmatized, seen as weak, lacking commitment, having failed the group.
Letting the side down.
Exactly. And criticism of the activity, even when it's offered constructively, with genuine intent to foster positive change, that can be met with swift ostracization, social exclusion, even a form of blacklisting within the marching arts community, which is pretty interconnected.
Don't rock the boat.
Pretty much. And the article also raises a poignant point about aging out, which should be a natural transition, right? A celebration. But sometimes it's treated almost like a spiritual or social death within the insular drum corps world.
How so?
Because these individuals are no longer actively contributing to the corps' performance on the field. Their perceived value within that specific context diminishes sharply.
So once you age out, you're less relevant.
Sadly, yes. Once a member hits the age limit, their direct utility to the performing ensemble ends. And their connection to that close-knit community they were central to can sometimes diminish significantly and abruptly.
That must be a huge shock for people.
It can be. The intense focus on the active performing members and the immediate competitive goals can inadvertently lead to a profound sense of loss of identity, purpose, relevance for those who transition into alumni status.
That sounds like the dispensing of existence the article talks about.
The article suggests it is, yeah. A subtle form, maybe. A pervasive, often unspoken message that your primary value and belonging were tied to your role as a performer. And once that role ceases, your connection to the group's core identity is fundamentally altered, often for the worse.
Wow. It's truly sobering to see how many of these criteria, developed from studying actual destructive cults, find such unsettling parallels within drum corps. And the article doesn't stop there. It brings up that moment from the documentary, Throw It Down.
Ah, yes, the Blue Coats documentary, Throw It Down.
Many of us have probably seen it.
Yeah.
What's the moment the article highlights?
It highlights a brief but incredibly revealing moment where a Blue Coats staff member, amidst the intense pressure and demanding atmosphere of tour, just openly acknowledges, with a mix of weariness and maybe dark humor.
What do they say?
They say, I think it might be a cult.
Wow. Just says it.
Just puts it out there. And what's truly significant is the immediate reaction, laughter. And that collective laughter, the article argues, speaks volumes because it signifies a shared, albeit perhaps unspoken and certainly unexamined, awareness of the all-consuming and potentially unhealthy nature of the activity. Everyone kind of knows.
It's almost like everyone involved recognizes on some level that this isn't just a tough summer activity. It's not just demanding.
Right. It demands an almost complete surrender of your time, your money, your sleep, even your individual identity for months on end.
And yet this reality is often treated as an inside joke, something to chuckle about knowingly, rather than a serious issue to be critically examined.
That nervous laughter, the article suggests, functions as a form of deflection, a way of acknowledging an uncomfortable truth without actually having to reckon with its implications.
So the staff member's comment wasn't just satire.
Probably not entirely. The article argues it reflects the logical consequence of a system that's become so rigid, demanding, and all-encompassing that it actively shapes how people within it think, behave, perceive their own experiences. The laughter normalizes this potentially problematic reality instead of prompting real introspection.
Okay, that brings us to a crucial section of the article. It delves into the different layers of belief that exist within the drum corps world depending on where you sit in the pyramid.
Yeah, the 3 layers of reality. This is really interesting.
Let's start with the member belief system. What are the core tenets, the assumptions, that are often instilled in the young people who join a corps?
The member belief system, as Francis describes it, is deeply rooted in this notion that being in drum corps isn't just an activity, it's something special, sacred almost. A tradition demanding complete, unwavering dedication.
And suffering.
Suffering is frequently romanticized, yeah. It's seen as a noble, necessary part of the experience. Exhaustion gets equated with discipline and hard work. Physical and emotional pain are often reinterpreted as signs you're pushing yourself to the limits required for success and growth.
And the article points out how questioning the system, the demands, the beliefs, that was often subtly framed as weakness, a lack of dedication, or you just couldn't handle it.
Exactly. Expressing doubt, raising critical questions, acknowledging burnout or stress, that could easily be perceived as lacking mental toughness, a failure to embrace the values, a betrayal even.
Burnout wasn't seen as a systemic issue from unsustainable demands.
No. It was often internalized as a personal failing. You just weren't cut out for drum corps. Even injuries, unless you overcame them heroically, could carry a subtle sense of shame.
And that mantra, you get out what you put in.
Ah, yes. Seems positive on the surface, right? But it often served to reinforce this idea that relentless personal sacrifice is the primary, if not the sole, key to success and fulfillment in drum corps. Blames the victim, in a way.
And the article also touches upon something really important, often overlooked, the evolution of hazing. Moving from overtly physical stuff towards so-called performance traditions.
Right. The really brutal physical hazing of the past might have decreased in some places, hopefully.
Hopefully.
But they've often been subtly replaced by practices framed as harmless traditions, team building, part of the experience. But Francis argues these can still carry coercion, humiliation, and reinforce those same power dynamics.
What kind of things are we talking about? Examples?
The article mentions things like rookie talent shows, where new members might be pressured into embarrassing or demeaning acts for the vet's amusement, under the guise of breaking the ice.
Ugh.
Initiation rituals, passed down without clear purpose or consent, and rookie run-throughs, where newer members might be intentionally set up to fail or forced to perform in humiliating ways, still happens.
And even if it's framed as fun, there's coercion through peer pressure, right? Fear of social ostracization. You can't really refuse if you want to fit in.
Precisely. The social risk of declining is significant. Isolation, exclusion being labeled as not buying into the core spirit.
And what about the big brother-sister systems?
The article critically examines those too. While they can offer genuine mentorship, they can also inadvertently function as peer-level compliance training, subtly reinforcing unspoken rules, discouraging challenges to the status quo.
Teaching rookies how not to rock the boat.
Essentially. As Francis powerfully states, even when these harmful practices are masked by a veneer of bonding, given affectionate nicknames, the underlying dynamic of harm and the perpetuation of potentially exploitative power structures remain. Bonding through harm is still harm.
Okay, let's move up the ladder. Staff and administrators. How do they typically see their roles, and what troubling realities does the article highlight about their perspectives?
Well, many staff members genuinely believe they're educators, mentors, positive role models, dedicated to shaping young lives through this demanding experience. Sincere belief, often.
Okay.
However, the article critically argues that the pedagogical methods employed by some can often inadvertently or even intentionally rely on tactics like public humiliation, punishment, fear, all rationalized as necessary for excellence or as teaching moments.
So correction can escalate into degradation, but it's framed as teaching.
That's the potential dynamic. While hopefully things have improved in some places, these tendencies can be deeply embedded in the culture of many corps.
And how are member struggles viewed from this perspective?
The article suggests that when performers inevitably struggle, make mistakes, have breakdowns under pressure, these genuine human responses are often dismissively categorized as just part of the process.
Not as a sign the process itself might be flawed or too intense.
Rarely. It's framed that way instead of acknowledging the process might be harmful. Questioning the staff's methods or the schedule's intensity can be swiftly framed as demonstrating a lack of resilience.
And asking for help.
That might be misinterpreted as a sign you're just not cut out for this level. You can't hack it.
Yeah, and that phrase, we're preparing them for life. The article calls that out as potential gaslighting. How?
Yeah, the article astutely argues that this well-intentioned but often misapplied phrase is frequently deployed as a justification for imposing unreasonable demands, perpetuating harsh treatment, dismissing grievances.
How does it justify it?
By implying that the extreme pressures and often unhealthy conditions of drum corps somehow directly mirror the real world. But the reality, as Francis points out, is that many defining aspects, chronic sleep deprivation, lack of autonomy, intense pressure to conform, bear little resemblance to healthy, sustainable workplaces or relationships.
It's not like the real world, mostly.
Not functional parts of it, no. It's a rhetorical tactic to deflect criticism and normalize harmful practices by claiming some higher developmental purpose that doesn't really hold up under scrutiny.
And since a lot of staff are former performers.
Exactly. The cycle continues. The intense experiences, even negative treatment they endured, get passed down as the way things are done, tradition, rather than being critically examined as potentially traumatic or unsound.
They see it as tradition, not trauma.
That's the crux of it. The ingrained belief system can be remarkably resistant to change because what previous generations endured is retrospectively viewed as a necessary rite of passage. It makes it hard for some staff to recognize the potential harm in perpetuating those same practices.
Okay, layer 3, the public and donors. What's the image presented to the outside world, and what are the discrepancies the article highlights?
To the general public, drum corps is often presented as wholesome, highly disciplined, like super marching band, basically, offering great opportunities for artistic expression, personal development.
Looks impressive.
Totally. Potential donors are often sold a compelling narrative. Profound personal transformation, leadership skills, Olympic-level dedication, and achievement. Inspiring stuff.
And parents see the uniforms, the music, the camaraderie, and think it's an enriching, growth-oriented summer camp. Expensive, but worth it.
Yes, the skill development, the artistry, the high-level performance are all attractive. But the article points out that the often brutal conditions, the grueling 12-plus-hour days, extreme weather, emotional toll while known within the community.
They're often downplayed or reframed externally.
Reframed as challenges, or even worn proudly as badges of honor by those who endured them. It was hell, but I survived.
So phrases like, I gave everything to this, or, yeah, it was a cult and I'd do it again, romanticize the suffering.
Pretty much. And the significant financial burden on members is often minimized, reframed as an investment in their future.
So how are the negative aspects handled in this public narrative?
Potential emotional trauma gets rebranded as developing resilience. Authoritarian control becomes discipline and structure. Intense suffering is portrayed as transformative and character building.
It's all positive spin.
The narrative presented externally often glosses over the negative exploitative aspects, emphasizes positive outcomes, minimizes personal costs. In this culture, the article argues, intense sacrifice, even bordering on abuse, can be inadvertently applauded as the price of greatness.
Which leads right into the next big section. Drum corps as a financial exploitation machine. Break down the financial realities for the members.
Yeah, the article argues drum corps operates on a fundamentally exploitative financial model beyond the physical emotional stuff. Members pay huge sums, thousands of dollars typically.
For tuition, travel, equipment, gear.
Right. And in exchange for this significant financial investment, they essentially become full-time unpaid laborers and highly visible brand ambassadors for the Corps all summer.
Working 12-plus-hour days, physically demanding work, wearing sponsored merch, appearing in promo content, all unpaid.
Exactly. They are directly contributing to the revenue streams, ticket sales, media subscriptions, merch, corporate sponsorships displayed on their uniforms, all that money.
But none of that goes back to the performers as wages or compensation.
Correct. Despite their central role in generating revenue, they get no direct financial benefit for their labor, on top of the thousands they already paid to labor.
And the article points out the contrast with leadership claims of tight budgets.
Yeah, it highlights the apparent hypocrisy. Some executive staff reportedly receiving significant hourly wages, while members sleep on gym floors and fundraise just to stay on tour.
That disparity is pretty stark.
It is. While leadership cites thin margins to justify high tuition, examples of hefty executive pay paint a different picture. The argument that it's cheaper than college is called out as potentially deceptive.
How so?
A way to mask the truth that members are paying for access to a prestige-driven cult that leverages their labor and money under the guise of a youth activity. The core point. Members pay to work full-time promoting the Corps. It's upside down.
And it's not just the members providing uncompensated labor, right? The article emphasizes the volunteers.
Absolutely crucial point.
Yeah.
The volunteer network, parents, retirees, alumni, is the operational backbone of tour.
Doing incredibly demanding jobs.
Around-the-clock jobs. Driving trucks and buses, thousands of miles, cooking thousands of meals, fixing uniforms, managing logistics, providing emotional support. All vital labor.
All unpaid.
Completely unpaid. These aren't minor roles. They're essential functions keeping the whole machine running, done by dedicated people giving time, energy, often their own money.
So the Corps rely heavily on this unpaid labor to keep costs down.
Hugely. While simultaneously raising tuition for the members, it's a system benefiting from unacknowledged, uncompensated efforts from performers and their support networks.
Then the article shines a light on another often undervalued group, the invisible creatives. Who are they and how are they exploited?
These are the designers, the music arrangers, the tech staff, the people who actually conceive, craft, and implement the artistic product you see on the field.
Who was making the show?
Exactly. The article argues they're often exploited too, underpaid for extensive work, not getting proper credit, sometimes even ghostwriting where their work is credited to bigger names.
So young designers might create whole shows credited to someone else. That's ethically questionable.
It raises huge questions about authorship and fair pay. And even established staff are often treated as contractors, no benefits like health insurance or retirement, limited input despite huge investments of time and creativity.
And their pay compared to their workload.
The article contrasts the month-long intensive creative process with often low compensation, sometimes less than what a single member pays in tuition for one summer.
It seems incredibly hypocritical for organizations celebrating artistry to undervalue or exploit the artists creating it.
That's the central argument. The model isn't just fueled by passion. It relies on pervasive, uncompensated, and undercompensated labor at nearly every level: members, volunteers, creatives.
And this collective labor is then packaged.
Repackaged and presented through sophisticated marketing and branding, contributing to ticket sales, merch revenue, financial stability, often benefiting executives more than the creators.
The article uses that phrase, feudalism in Nike Dry Fit.
Yeah, a potent analogy, underscoring the exploitative system masked by modern branding and youthful idealism.
Okay, then the article delves into the internal beliefs among the leadership class. What perspectives dominate there?
Within leadership, the article suggests there's often a near-religious reverence for prominent, successful designers. Their visions and methods treated as unquestionable doctrine.
And a core belief seems to be
that the ends justify the means. The ultimate success, especially competitive placement at finals, justifies whatever methods were used to get there.
even if those means involve sacrifice, exploitation, suppressing concerns.
That's the troubling implication raised. The intense focus on high placement can overshadow critical considerations about well-being, ethical treatment, long-term sustainability.
And are leaders aware of the problems?
The article suggests some might be aware of problematic or exploitative aspects, but stay silent. To protect their positions, creative autonomy, or access within the tight-knit, often political, inner circles.
And their view of the performers.
Perhaps a fundamental lack of trust in performers to self-manage or contribute beyond executing orders, leading to rigid hierarchies, fear as motivation, and perpetuating rituals disguised as tradition or character building.
Control is key.
The assumption often seems to be that high top-down control and surveillance are necessary for excellence, that performers can't be trusted without constant oversight, strict hierarchy, and reinforcement through questionable traditions.
Which stifles initiative and critical thinking among members.
Exactly. It perpetuates a system where compliance and obedience are valued over genuine engagement and shared ownership.
Finally, the article presents that stark comparison. External messaging versus internal reality. Let's go through those contrasts. Public message builds character. Internal reality.
The article contends it often cultivates obedience without question, not necessarily genuine character or ethical integrity, conformity over autonomy.
Public message prepares young people for life. Internal reality
Suggests it trains them to break themselves for someone else's vision, prioritizing external goals over personal well-being, which isn't great prep for a balanced life.
Public message makes them stronger.
Yeah.
Internal reality
Posits the system trains individuals to pay money to be reshaped into a temporary product, prioritizing performance over holistic growth.
And then the most damning part, the actual actions core have taken that contradict the messaging.
Yes, the article points to disturbing patterns. Downplaying or covering up abuse scandals until forced by public pressure. Protecting predators. Shaming whistleblowers. Gatekeeping innovation while claiming to champion progress.
Actions speak louder than words.
These actions, the author argues, reveal the true underlying priorities. Often self-preservation and image maintenance over the genuine well-being and safety of individuals.
The article wraps up with some powerful final thoughts. What are the key takeaways Francis leaves us with?
It concludes by asserting drum corps is more than just performance, it's a lifestyle cult. It socializes young people to define their self-worth through productivity and pain tolerance.
How does it thrive?
By strategically selling suffering as prestige, repackaging trauma as growth, concealing systemic issues behind a polished facade of idealism and artistry.
And the final, chilling thought.
That drum corps doesn't need a single charismatic leader like a traditional cult. Because, in an unsettling way, the real cult is baked right into the very system itself. The problematic aspects, the harmful dynamics, aren't just down to one person. They're ingrained in the structures, beliefs, traditions, and practices permeating the activity.
Wow. A truly sobering and essential perspective to consider. A lot to chew on there. And on that profound note...
A necessary conversation, I think.
Absolutely. So whether you marched, taught, volunteered, or just watched from the stands, if this conversation sparked something in you, good.
That's what revolution does.
Everything you've heard today is personal opinion and protected commentary.
If anyone takes issue, they're welcome to speak up or try to sue and explain their traditions on TikTok.
We've got the time and 300,000 people watching.
This is the Marching Revolution.
Thank you for
Boots
listening
on the
to the
ground
Marching
with a
Revolution
thunderous
podcast.
beat. Hearts in sync, our
Don't
purpose
forget to
complete.
like and subscribe.
Map of the future drawn by our stride. Through the struggle we walk unified. Marching forward where no chains can hold. Hands in the dirt, we carve out gold. From the ashes we rise, we sing. For the power of the people is everything. Flags that wave like the dawn's first light, guiding us through the endless night. Every step shakes the earth awake. Our voices roar for justice's sake. Marching forward where no chains can hold. Hands in the dirt, we carve out gold. From the ashes we rise, we sing. For the power of the people is everything. The rhythm of hope, it pounds in our chest. We won't stop until we've done our best. The world is ours to turn.